Russia and India share one of the most enduring partnerships in modern geopolitics, born out of Cold War solidarity, strengthened through annual summits since the year 2000 and recalibrated today in the shadow of the Ukraine war and global sanctions. This relationship has stood the test of shifting power balances. President Putin's visit to New Delhi for the 23rd annual summit is more than just another meeting. It is a reminder of both continuity and adaptation in this strategic bond. Let's connect the dots. The story begins in the 1950s when India and the Soviet Union forged a close partnership. Defense cooperation, economic assistance, and diplomatic support became the pillars of that relationship. In 1971, the Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation was a defining moment, with Moscow backing India during the Bangladesh Liberation War. But history took a sharp turn after the collapse of the USSR. Russia faced internal turmoil, and India diversified its foreign policy, engaging more with the United States and other countries. Yet, defense and energy ties with Moscow endured. In 2000, during the Russian President Putin's visit to India, the annual summit mechanism was launched, an institutionalized format that guaranteed regular high-level engagement. These summits delivered landmark agreements: the BrahMos missile joint venture, nuclear energy projects like Kudankulam, and cooperation in space. Now let's trace some milestones. In 2000, the Declaration on Strategic Partnership laid the foundation for a structured relationship. By 2007, civil nuclear cooperation expanded collaboration into sensitive high-technology domains. And in 2010, the partnership was elevated to the status of a special and privileged strategic partnership, reflecting unique trust and convergence between New Delhi and Moscow. Between 2014 and 2021, the partnership deepened further. In 2014, deals on nuclear reactors and hydrocarbons reinforced Russia's role as a key energy partner. In 2018, India went ahead with the purchase of the S-400 missile defense system despite US sanctions pressure, an emphatic statement of strategic autonomy. The 21st annual summit in 2021 reaffirmed defense, production, cooperation, and connectivity projects, broadening the scope of engagement.
Both the sides at every level have invested a great deal of political capital in taking it forward. I still remember that when he had come here in December 2021, at that time the conflict had not started, but the tensions around Ukraine were going on. And Mr. Putin was on Indian soil for barely 4 hours. But still he invested that much of time, effort, energy to come, basically to send out a message that this relationship is very important for Russia.
In 2024, Prime Minister Narendra Modi received Russia's highest civilian honor, the Order of St. Andrew, during his visit to Moscow. It was announced in 2019, and the award symbolized Russia's recognition of India as a steadfast partner in an increasingly complex global order. Today, Russia remains India's largest defense supplier, though diversification and self-reliance are accelerating. Joint ventures like BrahMos continue alongside licensed production of tanks and aircraft. India's imports of discounted Russian oil have cushioned its economy, while nuclear cooperation persists with additional reactors planned. Bilateral trade crossed $65 billion in 2024, driven largely by energy imports and new payment mechanisms bypassing Western sanctions.
ऊर्जा सुरक्षा भारत रूस साझेदारी का मजबूत और महत्वपूर्ण स्तंभ रहा है। सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में हमारा दशकों पुराना सहयोग क्लीन एनर्जी की हमारी साझा प्राथमिकताओं को सार्थक बनाने में महत्वपूर्ण रहा है। हम इस विन विन सहयोग को जारी रखेंगे। क्रिटिकल मिनरल्स में हमारा सहयोग पूरे विश्व में सिक्योर और डाइवर्सिफाइड सप्लाई चेन सुनिश्चित करने के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। इससे क्लीन एनर्जी, हाईटेक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और न्यू एज इंडस्ट्रीज में हमारी साझेदारी को ठोस समर्थन मिलेगा।
Diplomatically, India and Russia coordinate in BRICS, the SCO and the RIC format. Both emphasize a multipolar world order resisting Western dominance. India values Russia's support in the UN Security Council and on issues like Afghanistan. Yet, balancing ties is complex. Russia's growing dependence on China complicates India's calculus, while India's deepening relations with the US and Europe add another layer of nuance.
आर्थिक सहयोग को नई ऊंचाइयों पर ले जाना हमारी साझी प्राथमिकता है। इसे साकार करने के लिए आज हमने 2030 तक के लिए एक इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन प्रोग्राम पर सहमति बनाई है। इससे हमारा व्यापार और निवेश डाइवर्सिफाइड, बैलेंस और सस्टेनेबल बनेगा और सहयोग के क्षेत्रों में नए आयाम भी जुड़ेंगे।
India has abstained from UN votes condemning Russia, calling instead for dialogue. This stance preserves ties with Moscow while avoiding rupture with the West. Discounted Russian oil supplies have been critical for India's fiscal stability. Long-term cooperation spans LNG, coal and nuclear power. The international North-South transport corridor links India to Russia via Iran, offering alternatives to Western-dominated trade routes. Arctic cooperation is also emerging, with India eyeing Russian LNG projects.
We understand that there is a pressure. There is a pressure over India, and actually this is the reason that we have to be very careful in creating an architecture of our relationship that must be free of any influence coming from third countries. We have to secure our relationship. We have to secure our trade that brings mutual benefit.
This visit is President Putin's first to India in 4 years. It signals intent to restore rhythm in ties disrupted by the Ukraine war. It is a reaffirmation of the special and privileged strategic partnership. Both nations are securing long-term oil and gas supplies, ensuring continuity of joint defense projects despite sanctions, and expanding trade beyond hydrocarbons and to pharmaceuticals, IT and agriculture. Russian President Vladimir Putin's state visit marked a new chapter in India-Russia relations. Welcomed personally by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the summit delivered a roadmap of economic cooperation through 2030, ensuring trade resilience against global sanctions and tariffs. A landmark agreement was signed to train Indian specialists in polar waters navigation, opening doors to Arctic shipping routes and maritime expertise. People-to-people ties were strengthened with India's announcement of free 30-day e-tourist visas for Russian citizens, alongside new cultural and educational exchanges. And on the global stage, President Putin endorsed Prime Minister Modi's peace initiative on Ukraine, positioning India as a key mediator in the conflict. Together, these outcomes underscored the enduring strategic partnership between India and Russia, while highlighting India's growing role as a bridge in an increasingly divided world. The summit also highlights coordination in BRICS and the SCO and discussions on Indo-Pacific dynamics. For India, it is about strategic autonomy, engaging Russia while deepening ties with the US and EU. For Russia, it demonstrates resilience and relevance beyond its partnership with China. Institutionalized since the year 2000, These summits have produced landmark agreements in defense, energy, and nuclear cooperation. Current relations remain strong in defense and energy, but increasingly transactional, shaped by sanctions and global shifts. India-Russia ties reinforce multipolarity, though divergences exist due to the Russia-China closeness, the India-US convergence. But disjointed oil, defense cooperation, and connectivity projects anchor this partnership even as diversification continues. In essence, India-Russia ties are no longer sentimental Cold War legacies. They are pragmatic, transactional, and strategically vital. The 23rd Annual Summit is not just about bilateral cooperation. It is about how both nations navigate a fractured global order, balancing energy, defense, and diplomacy in ways that will shape geopolitics and geoeconomics for years to come. This is the story of a dramatic betrayal in Mexico's world of drugs. It started with a trick. Ismael El Mayo Zambada was one of the most powerful leaders in the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. He thought he was going to look at land in northern Mexico for new airstrips. He had been the most wanted man in Mexico for years. And unlike many cartel bosses, he had never been arrested. People often said he was a ghost, always one step ahead of the police. But on that day, things did not go the way he expected. According to US officials, El Mayo was invited to a meeting near Culiacan. Joaquin Guzman Lopez, one of the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, had called him there. El Mayo trusted him enough to go. When he entered a dark room, armed men suddenly climbed in through a window. They grabbed him, put a hood over his head, tied his hands, and carried him out. He was taken to a private plane waiting at a remote airstrip. Inside, he was zip-tied to a seat and given a drink with sedatives. When the plane landed, he was no longer in Mexico. He had been flown across the border and handed over to US authorities in Texas. US prosecutors say Guzman Lopez helped set up this entire operation. Some reports describe it as a kidnapping. And when the news reached Mexico, it caused a political storm. Mexico's president at the time accused the United States of being involved. But the US denied this.
First of all, Joaquin Guzman voluntarily surrendered. Secondly, the evidence we saw when we arrived in Santa Teresa, New Mexico at the airport is that El Mayo was taken there against his will. There were no resources from the United States involved in that operation. It wasn't a US plane, it wasn't a US pilot, and it wasn't our agents or our people in Mexico. This was an operation between the cartels where one handed over the other.
But many experts said it would have been impossible to carry out such a capture without American knowledge. Soon after, Guzman Lopez himself was arrested. Both he and El Mayo were taken into custody after landing that same plane in Texas.
As you've heard, drug kingpin Ismael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, has confessed to a lifetime of crime in service to the Sinaloa cartel, a foreign terrorist organization. Thanks to the relentless work of our prosecutors and our federal agents, El Mayo will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He will die in a U.S. federal prison where he belongs. El Mayo was one of the most prolific and powerful drug traffickers in this world. His partner was El Chapo. They were co-founders of the Sinaloa cartel. They brutally murdered multiple people and flooded our country with drugs. Their reign of terror is over. he will never walk free again.
Months later, in a U.S. courtroom, Joaquin Guzman Lopez now pleaded guilty. He admitted that he helped run large parts of the Sinaloa cartel's drug business. He also admitted helping kidnap his father's former partner El Mayo by tricking him into boarding the plane. As part of his plea, he accepted that he was involved in producing and smuggling huge amounts of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, and fentanyl into the United States. He is part of Los Chapitos. It is the group of El Chapo's sons who took over parts of the cartel after their father was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Let's understand the family tree of El Chapo. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was born in a poor rural part of Sinaloa in Mexico. He had numerous siblings, including Miguel Angel, Aureliano, Arturo, Emilio, Armida, and Bernanda Guzman Loira. Over the years, El Chapo Guzman married several women and fathered numerous children. His children would eventually become involved in his criminal organization, the Sinaloa Cartel. With his first wife, Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez, he had Ivan Archibaldo, Jesus Alfredo, Alejandrina Giselle, and Cesar Guzman Salazar. His second wife was Griselda Guadalupe Lopez Perez, with whom he had Ovidio, Joaquin, Griselda Guadalupe, and Edgar Guzman Lopez. Edgar was killed in 2008. Guzman's third and most well-known wife is Emma Coronel Aspuro, with whom he shared twin daughters, Emily Guadalupe and Maria Joaquina Guzman Coronel, who were born in 2011. After his final imprisonment and extradition to the US, 4 of his sons, Ivan Archibaldo, Jesus Alfredo, Ovidio, and Joaquin, collectively known as Los Chapitos, reportedly assumed significant control of the Sinaloa cartel. Ovidio and Joaquin have since been arrested and extradited to the US. For years, the Sinaloa cartel has been one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. It began with people like El Chapo and El Mayo, who built a massive drug empire stretching from Mexico to the United States. Over time, the cartel changed. It expanded its roots, its partners, and its business. And in recent years, its biggest money maker has become fentanyl. It is a synthetic drug that is far stronger than heroin. Fentanyl has created a serious crisis in the United States. It is now the leading cause of death for Americans between 18 and 45 years of age. A small amount can be deadly. US officials say the Sinaloa cartel, especially Los Chapitos, played a major role in making and smuggling it.
Over the last 3 decades, El Mayo and his accomplices made billions of dollars, hundreds of millions each year they were making, by bringing poisonous drugs into our country. The Sinaloa cartel initially built their businesses with cocaine, but then under El Mayo's leadership, they turned to heroin, they turned to fentanyl. They purchased fentanyl precursor chemicals from China. They made the drug in Mexico and flooded it into our communities, killing our kids.
So when Guzman Lopez stood in court and said guilty, it was not only about kidnapping El Mayo. It was also about years of drug trafficking that has caused thousands of deaths in the United States. His plea deal means prosecutors will not seek the death penalty. He is expected to avoid a life sentence, but he still faces many years in prison. Meanwhile, the capture of El Mayo and the betrayal behind it has changed the balance of power inside the cartel. For decades, El Chapo and El Mayo ran the group together. After El Chapo's arrest, the Chapitos began fighting for more control. With El Mayo gone, their rivalry exploded. Violence broke out in Sinaloa as different groups tried to take over what was left of his operations. Mexico's government has struggled to control this internal war. Officials even said they were looking at possible treason charges against anyone involved in the kidnapping of El Mayo. The old leaders in Mexico's drug world are falling now. The younger generation is fighting among themselves. And while these battles continue, the flow of drugs, especially fentanyl, has not stopped. The global drug trade keeps evolving. And if no concrete action is taken, this cycle of violence and death will continue. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We will see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Mark Lin signing off. Take care and stay safe.